You are live.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome for attending tonight for the Climate Action Plan and sharing our greenhouse gas emissions inventories. I'm Jackie Gild, I'm the Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability for the City of Annapolis. And along with me are Dylan Lakonich, who is an Environmental Program Manager, and Ashley Diaz, who's also an Environmental Program Manager with the City of Annapolis. Part of this presentation will be led by Emily O'Neill. So she works with our consultant, Karamita, who performed our greenhouse gas inventories along with staff participation and has been leading our community outreach with stakeholders and staff. So thank you very much for participating. There will be portions of this webinar which will allow Q&A and interaction by participants. So your mics will turn on when that portion or portions begins, but otherwise your mics are silenced. We apologize for any technological difficulties you're experiencing. I think some people may have gone to the YouTube link right away rather than to the link that was provided to join the webinar, which was emailed to you. It was emailed again by our TV staff and tech staff. So you may want to check your emails if you have not already joined us. And this webinar is being recorded so that if you have missed part of it or missed all of it, or you know someone that has, we will definitely send out messages to that effect to everyone who registered that they can view this webinar again at their leisure. So I'm going to turn everything now over to Dylan to get us started.
Thanks, Jackie, for the introduction, and hi out to all the attendees, and thank you for joining us tonight. Really happy to be here. We've been working hard with Karamita. Emily has been a great leader for them, just to really get a full understanding of the situation with greenhouse gases in the city and trying to figure out a way to move forward. I would like to give a quick shout out to Rob Savage, Alderman, for his work on the 2006 greenhouse gas inventory, which was done in 2008. And that serves as our baseline for the 2024 data that we will be presenting today. I do want to allow Emily to introduce herself. So Emily, would you mind?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Emily O'Neill. I've had the pleasure of working with the Annapolis team over the last few months on this climate action plan and looking forward to sharing some of those results and our process with you tonight.
Thank you, Emily. So we're just going to jump right in. We have a few things to go over. First, I want to just talk about our project approach. Then, of course, the greenhouse gas inventory results, the climate action plan project itself, the responses, and giving you the opportunity to respond to an online form, questions and answers, and if we have time, open responses. So to get in some methodology, you may be familiar, but it's good to cover the topic again. What exactly is a greenhouse gas? So that's an atmospheric gas like carbon dioxide, methane, even water vapor that traps heat. And that acts like a blanket basically to keep the earth warm. And this is actually an important process for maintaining life on Earth. However, human activities have increased that concentration, which has led to global warming and thus climate change. And that's related to respond to those greenhouse gases and their increase, we have reduction measures. And so those are actually shifts away from carbon intensive activities to low carbon or carbon neutral activities. And those actions can be programs, policies, incentives, et cetera, that causes the shift. So to really understand how we're addressing that specific issue, first we need to understand where we are. And to provide some context, we in Maryland have a statewide piece of legislation called the Climate Solutions Now Act, which establishes certain goals by certain years based on a 2006 greenhouse gas inventory baseline. And thankfully, we in the city back in 2008 established that baseline for ourselves. And so now we are basically comparing where we're at now and then verifying that data, and we're going to do some reduction modeling. And so based on that, we'll do the planning. So we established working groups. We had a reduction measure portfolio, actions for implementation, and these were basically evaluated, and we'll continue to reevaluate these as they go on. And obviously, as part of that, we have community outreach. So we've been having strategic sessions. We had an in-person community town hall. We've engaged different experts, nonprofits, businesses, and everything of the like. And right now, of course, we have our webinar session, and then we'll later be doing another city council, or a city council presentation with the Climate Action Plan launch. Just talk a little bit more about our approach to community outreach. We understand that there's a lot of different reasons to engage the community. This is our city, and these are also our missions. So we want to engage everyone between residents, businesses, organizations. We want to share information, we gather input, foster collaboration just to make sure that everybody feels like they can do their part. Encourage participation in initiatives, ensure that the Climate Action Plan reflects community values, experiences, and of course, environmental justice. We want to promote transparency through ongoing communication and updates. So, we want to get into the meat and potatoes now, the greenhouse gas inventory results. So based on all sorts of different analyses that we were able to get through, we had a community greenhouse gas inventory, and we also had a city government operations greenhouse gas inventory. And so for the community, we basically have 3 different sectors covering 2 different scopes. I won't go into too much detail about what those scopes entail, but basically, these are direct or in some ways indirect emissions. So for transportation, this largely comes from the trips that are generated to and from and within the city. So we actually, we're able to find that trip data and basically generate, based on averages and assumptions on fuel economy and things like that, how much in terms of tons of CO2 are being released in our community each year, or at least as of 2024. Then we have waste emissions, and this comes from several different sources. So this actually can come from what you put in your trash bin, that actually will eventually create emissions, particularly in the form of methane. But waste is also found in the form of effluent from wastewater, and then also the energy use of those wastewater plants. So it's more than just potential for water pollutants. Water use also does have a greenhouse gas footprint. And then, of course, buildings and energy. I think it's pretty straightforward. And from that, we have lighting energy that comes from the buildings, HVAC, all other sorts of different systems that goes into buildings. And then, of course, everything of the like. So to get into building emissions, which is a little bit more, we have our institutional buildings, and that covers about 1/4 of it. Industrial buildings, as a lot of us know, we don't have a ton of industry in our city, so it's not surprising that's about 10%. Commercial buildings, about 15%, and residential buildings, also not too terribly surprising, about 50% or 47%. So we do have some things that actually sequester carbon. This basically takes carbon out of the air. So, a tree canopy can actually sequester about 652 gasoline power passenger vehicles driven for 1 year. And electricity usage for households was actually just about 10,000 kilowatt hours in 2024, which is actually about 5% less than the national average. So can't exactly say why. We can make assumptions, but the city in general is just a little bit more energy saving in terms of household electricity use. Municipal operations notably release less than 1% of actually the entire community-wide emissions. So based on that understanding, we understand the importance of focusing on helping the community reduce the emissions. And so as I was discussing earlier, we have a 2006 baseline, And you'll see it on the left. On the top is community-wide, and on the bottom is government operations. It's broken down into each sector. So we have transportation, waste, residential, commercial, and industrial buildings. And so we have that on the right as well. So we can actually see that in terms of a split, transportation actually went up in terms of its share. But in total, we are seeing higher emissions from transportation, probably means that more trips are being generated from the city. But over the course of about 18 years, not too terribly high of a shift, but definitely something that's a bit concerning and something that we need to address as a city. Waste has gone down substantially. So that could be from wastewater, that could be from the actual waste that people are putting into the landfill, and et cetera. And then buildings and energy. So in the previous study, it had been broken down to residential, commercial, and industrial. But now we just kind of put it all into one. And so that total has gone down pretty substantially. You can see that the previous total was just about 320,000 CO2 tons. Now it's about half of that at 165,000. This time around, we were able to account for the tree canopy CO2 tons that was reduced, basically taken out of the atmosphere. And so that brings us to a total that's about 165,000 tons lower than in 2006. So we're already making great progress. Like I just addressed, there are some areas that do need to be addressed perhaps a bit more stringently, but good progress so far. And then the city government operations. So we had a total of about 12,000 CO2 tons, which has gone down to a fourth of that at about 3,000. So that's substantial, really good news. We are making good progress, and we want to make sure that we're continuing on that trend. So to go from the greenhouse gas inventory to the climate action plan, obviously we want to establish what that roadmap entails. So we've already measured the greenhouse gas emissions, and now we need to identify solutions to reduce them. So we're going to have step-by-step guidance for implementing those necessary changes. And then we're going to actually track and monitor and identify the co-benefits for the community beyond just, doing our part for the environment. So when it comes to implementation actions, like I said, that has co-benefits, but that also breaks down into authority to implement, timeline of implementation, funding availability and cost, goals and targets. So you can already kind of see how all those different things kind of gain levels of complication, but through coordination and focus on the goals, we can make sure that we get there. So I want to open it up to the attendees to actually respond with how they think we should move forward. And so we do have an online form, which is very similar to the poster boards that we had at the town hall. So the form, you can either access it by that link there, or you can use the QR code. And on that form, it'll list out all sorts of different things. And I want to go through that with you. So I'll give a couple of minutes just for everyone to get on that form, and everyone can participate asynchronously if they like. But hopefully I can, go along and kind of just break out some things so they're a little bit more clear. So in that form, you will see that there is the first two questions sort of address environmental impacts and co-benefits. So there are certain things that the community might be feeling more than others. So we just want to hear that from people. Along with that, we also have those co-benefits that we were addressing. So what sort of things would matter most to someone? That could be reducing energy costs, could be strengthening community resilience, improve transportation, things along those lines. And for anyone who may have missed the QR code, they'll be throughout these slides, so you won't miss it. So the first area for the climate action plan that is addressed in the form are the transportation emissions. So we've got it recapped over here. And so we just wanted to, actually am now seeing that there is a bit of a miscalculation there. So we will correct that, but that's okay. So I just want to want you people to share your thoughts on those 6 different reduction measures. That can be increased walking and cycling, it could be electric and alternative fuel vehicles, increased use of public transit, electric and alternative fuel transit, efficient travel, which is basically designing, the transportation system to be more conducive to using less gasoline or things along those lines to make sure that, well, things are efficient. Micromobility, so that can come in the way of providing people scooters or bicycles or maybe even kayaks in our, water-blessed city, so they can get around to the last mile in a lower carbon emission way. I'll give people a couple seconds to reply to that.
Do we have responses coming in, Dylan?
I won't know if people have responded until they've actually hit submit on the form.
Okay. Just want to make sure people have connection to that.
Mm-hmm.
So in the lull while we're waiting, this will not be the last of our communications with the public on the greenhouse gas emissions inventories or the climate action plan. We had our first meeting in November open to the public to introduce our findings and have participation via the post-it boards with ideas. This is only our second method of reaching out to the public. We envision other webinars as this inventory and climate action plan progresses, and having access to means to publish questions and comments via our website. We plan to have a draft of the climate action plan early spring, late winter, that we also will share and get feedback on. And we invite you at any time to contact us, any 3 of us at staff, to share your concerns, your questions, and your ideas. We want this to be an ongoing process with the public.
Thank you, Jackie. So yeah, now we have forestry and land emissions. So the 4 reduction measures that came up as primary feasible options during those working groups that Jackie was talking about, that would include land conservation and water quality improvement, expanding tree canopy and improving urban greening, sustainable land use, and local food production. Sustainable land use might include things like zoning, building code, things along those lines, just to make sure that things are done in a way that's more friendly to the environment, and particularly in the realm of climate emissions.
What's happening here?
Okay. So now we have waste emissions. And so like I said, this includes wastewater. This also includes physical waste and the emissions from the landfill. So there are 5 reduction measures that were addressed as most feasible for our community. And that includes recycling, adaptive reuse, reducing waste generation. So, that's one of the 3 R's that people talk about, just reducing. Food recovery, so that actually means diverting waste and making sure that, things that are food that's still good to be eaten doesn't make it to the landfill, and instead it makes it to someone who could use that food. And then, of course, composting, so actually reusing food waste for things like agriculture and things along those lines. And as we said in the beginning, we will have time towards the end for questions and answers and open discussion if we have time for it. So if you have any questions about any of these reduction measures, just please hold your question for the next few minutes. Okay. And then we have building and energy emissions. So we have 8 reduction measures here, actually. So that could include heat pumps, building retrofits, greening of the grid. So basically that means BG&E, handles that energy that's coming from those different generators. And so we want to actually make sure that that grid that the utility provider is distributing is actually coming from greener sources. So that could be solar energy, wind energy, perhaps controversially, nuclear energy. And your comments about that would be valuable, among other different strategies. That would include low carbon new construction and demolition. So that means, basically there are certain emissions that come with the construction of a building and also, of course, the demolition. So actually regulating the construction and demolition so that it's more friendly to the environment. Solar rooftops within our own community, appliance upgrades. So, making things more energy efficient or less reliant on gas, efficient lighting, and community solar, which, unlike solar on your own rooftop, is basically an off-site solar installation that a customer pays into to support clean energy. So I'll give people a few minutes for that one.
I received a comment, Dylan, that it takes some time to fill these forms
I
out.
understand. And they don't need to be responded to right away. We just want to make sure that people feel they have time to look at these in live time. And like I said, if they have questions about it, we can respond to that now, in a few minutes. But yeah, I totally understand. And I don't expect people to respond to this in the next 30 seconds. But yeah, thank you.
Hey, Dylan, can you remind us how long that form will stay live on the website?
Yeah, great question. That'll stay live until December 31st. So people have until the end of the year to make their comments or suggestions about the climate action plan. And these different things we'll take into account. And Karamita and ourselves will, use that feedback and tailor the climate action plan according to it. Good question. Okay. So as you can see, we have time for questions and answers. I understand that people may be still filling out the form. I'm not trying to disrupt those people. But if anyone has anything that they're curious about, now would be a great time to ask.
All right, Rob, I'm going to give you permission to talk.
All right. Yeah, thank you. A great presentation.
Thanks,
It
Rob.
was interesting to see the comparison to 2006,
Yeah.
or sorry, 2008, whenever the original data was. So yeah, I just had 2 questions on that. I was curious, do you have enough data to determine what some of the factors might be that cause such a increase in the transportation sector emissions? Because that's jumped from 27% to 47%, which is a surprise to me.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And sort of a yes and no. So when it comes to the increase in the split, I think a lot of that comes from the fact that building emissions went down massively. They went down about 50% from 2006 to 2024. So that shows that people are installing more energy efficient lighting and all sorts of other things to do their part to save money. So that's really good to see that the community has really reduced the emissions from buildings. However, the advancements in transportation technology haven't moved along with the pace of buildings and energy quite as much. And so while we would hope that at the very least, it hasn't gone up, it has gone up. And I think that's probably because more trips are being generated. The population's gone up since 2006. Just the nature of the world, population's increasing. But I don't have the exact data as to why it is exactly, if it really is that more trips are generated. The methodology was a bit different from 2006 to 2024, and I think that's the biggest complication there.
Yeah, so this is revealing some areas where we need to footnote or caveat some of our findings. We can, from this, go to transportation, the Department of Transportation, and see if we can get data on increased number of trips, routes that have been added, and also the increase in our fleet. Because we have increased the size of our fleet and different vehicles that come into the fleet. Now we have been starting to electrify. We have 2 electric buses, 2 more on order. We've started to add to our fleet in general, but some of those vehicles have been added in the last year. So we wouldn't have captured 2025 data, and they probably wouldn't have made a significant difference yet, because we really are just starting that process in the last few years.
Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, that was my second question, having to do with the city government operations change, because that also had a decrease, to your point, a decrease in the vehicle fleet, total emissions. I'm just curious to dig into that as far as why. And I presumably for both cases, for the community-wide, part of that building energy reduction, was that due to increasing standards at the state, as far as we're getting an increasing portion of our energy from renewable sources?
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and that could definitely be part of it. I do know that the methodology that you and the others had used in 2008 for that emission data for buildings was actually taking the data from BG&E, if I'm not mistaken. And that's exactly how we did this time around.
Yeah, and also I was going to add that we also, Rob, you may recall that we had done an energy audit with Honeywell, and there were specific actions recommended that the city did implement, with the lighting that turns on and off when people are actually using spaces. We updated our HVAC systems. We implemented LEDs everywhere in our parking garages and fire stations, police stations, and our pump houses. So we took some pretty significant actions between 2019 and 2020. And I think those are paying off. And it's interesting to note, there are increasing standards, energy efficiency standards that we're adhering to since 2006. And so even though we've added new buildings to our inventory, we actually have emissions decreasing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I could take hours to talk about this stuff, but another time. I don't want to take up the public's time, but definitely look forward to looking more at this and sitting down at some point to talk about it.
I'll also briefly mention that the methodology and the group that builds that methodology, the Global Protocol for Community-Based Inventories, does do an annual update as new research comes out and as we learn more about these sectors. So I would also anticipate a degree or a margin of flexibility just on the fact that in the last 20 years or so, there have been significant upgrades to that methodology as well.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah, last time we just used ICLEI. ICLEI provided a model that we used. I forget the name of it.
Emily, do you know if it was ClearPath in 2006?
Yeah, it would have been ClearPath.
Got it. Go to ClearPath.
But we're now using a new version of ClearPath, an updated one, ClearPath 2.
Yep, exactly. Which now integrates GPC in as its methodology.
Okay. Any other questions?
If there are other questions, attendees, you can raise your hand using a button that should be at the bottom of your screen. But as of right now, I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Alrighty. And if anyone just has suggestions or things that they'd like to bring up in terms of an open discussion, we can also respond to that. But otherwise, Rob, I see you turned off, unmuted.
Yeah. Just again, looking at the comparison for the government operations, I see a list. So in 2006, we had water sewage split out. Do you have that sector grouped in
We
with
have
buildings or?
water and sewage and community under waste. I didn't notice that. And yeah, there was a bit of debate as to where that should be within city operations or community, but we figured that because most of the emissions, just based on volume, are coming from the community using those facilities, that it makes more sense to capture that under community. So that's where that is now.
Well, it's government infrastructure though.
Definitely, I see what you mean. It was
Run,
a
paid for
heated debate we
by
had.
the government, but it makes it difficult to, I guess you have to decide what's more. I think what might be more important would be continuity to be able to compare with the original baseline in 2006. We'd have to have that data in there to make it more.
And we can make that more clear in future analyses for sure.
Yeah, because otherwise it's going to mess with the data moving forward.
That makes sense. I'll write that down.
That raises a point, Dylan. Maybe you need to also mention what is not captured by the study facilities that are especially like USNA.
Yeah, good point. Pretty much the only things that were excluded, well, everything within the city proper was included, including those city facilities that are technically outside of the city boundaries. Things like Jackie just said, Naval Academy are not included because it's its own federal jurisdiction. But yeah, everything pretty much else under the sun, streetlights, buildings, what have you, are included.
And we're including county schools and
Correct.
libraries.
Thank you.
And St. John's College is also included.
Yes.
Those counties, county schools and libraries that are within city limits, that is.
Right. Okay. I see 2 responses have come in for the form. Some people might be still doing theirs. Yeah, if anyone has any suggestions or clarification needed, questions, please feel free to raise your hand.
Can we access this presentation online, or are there any drafts that we can look at publicly, or what's your plan for releasing some of those?
Yeah, great question. We plan on releasing the full report for the greenhouse gas inventory very soon, and we can release a copy of this presentation. I do want to clean up that miscalculation. I believe it was under the transportation graphic. But once that's fixed, we can publish this webinar or the presentation, no problem.
And Rob, we just need to review the inventories, the summaries of them, and then, as Dylan mentioned, then we'll publish them. And we will publish a draft climate action plan, but that won't be available till late winter, early spring.
Okay.
Karen, I see you raising your hand.
All right, Karen, I'm giving you the ability to talk.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry if I missed this, but does the city, do you guys currently have electric vehicles in your fleet, or are you planning to get electric vehicles, or expand your fleet to transition to more electric vehicles?
Yeah,
we have
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, we have about 11% of our fleet is now either hybrid or electric. And that doesn't include some of those vehicles which are alternative fuel. But yes, we've acquired quite a number of electric and hybrid vehicles in the past few years. Jackie, did you have something to add?
Yes, so we have 11% are hybrid. And a lot of those are police cruisers, which they purchased a number, Central Services purchased a number of hybrid vehicles just this past year for police cruisers. We're working on, in the future, changing that to all electric. But to your question, Karen, we only, of the fleet, there's only 1% that is fully electric. So that's a number we're working towards improving greatly. We have 2 electric buses now, and the small cruisers that we use, the ones that look like golf carts, we use those a lot during March Madness and other events. Those are electric as well. We have 2 they're GEMs. They call them GEM, GEM. And then we have on order 2 more electric buses. But the general fleet is what needs the greatest number of improvements. Ashley is working to implement some grant funds we have to put in more EV charging infrastructure at our city facilities so that we can support more electric vehicles. And she's working with Central Services to ensure that there are more all electric vehicles once we put in the charging infrastructure for them, both fast chargers and level 2 chargers. So that's an area that we want to push forward on. And a large part of that will be dependent upon how much resources are devoted to our fleet in this coming FY27 budget. So Ashley's working with Matt Flinner, who's our Director of Central Services, on that issue. Definitely needs improvement to help us reach our goals and reductions of emissions from the transportation sector. And public charging infrastructure is also needed to support people that wish to buy EVs and do not have ready access to charging infrastructure.
Yeah, great point.
If I could just also make a suggestion related to that, just because I know the county has a lot of EVs now, and just to suggest that as the city transitions to more EVs, to consider what kind of EV you're buying and whether or not it has the ability to, like certain EV cars are better suited to fast charging than others. And then also some of them have the ability to shut off charging at 80% versus charging to 100%, which makes the battery last longer, and other ones don't. And I just have observed, since the county has started acquiring EVs, there's a lot of parking it overnight and letting it charge to 100%, which can greatly reduce the longevity of certain types of EVs. So just something to think about, I think, as the city moves into that and you decide what kind of vehicles you're getting and how the city's going to use them, to try to be strategic about that.
Yeah, great point, Karen. And I think that some vehicles allow you to change your settings so that they switch off at 80%.
Yeah, but not all of them. I speak as a Nissan Leaf owner, and the Nissan Leafs have all been recalled so that none of them are allowed to use fast charging anymore. And then also they have never been able to shut off at 80%. And that's what the county is using as Nissan Leaf. So that's why I'm bringing it up.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone else have any questions or suggestions? Rob
is raising his hand again.
Of course. So 2 other questions. What kind of efforts are you putting into data validation as far as ensuring we can use this moving forward for benchmarking? And related to that, are you seeing the new baseline as 2006 or 2025?
The baseline will remain as 2006. Emily, if you're here, would you mind talking a bit about data validation?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to data validation, there are 3 different tiers of data quality that we look for and assure, because there will be some instances where the best version of the data is not something that we have access to or is currently tracked. And so if that's the case, then we move to tier 2 and sometimes go to tier 3. And so through that process, we assess that we have the best available data at hand. And if we do have to pull from national averages, regional averages, or have to make any assumptions, we do so utilizing the GPC safe and ready assumptions to deploy. And then we use those relative to the Annapolis specific data sets.
Thanks, Emily.
Were you able to compare sufficiently to the original effort in 2000, I guess it was 7 through 9 for the original footprint as far as like for being able to ensure that we are drawing from as much as possible the original data sources, so we can use this for. I just want to make. I'm just asking basically to see how much surety we have as far as certainty we have as far as being able to use this in the future for accurate benchmarking.
No, that's a good question. I think it came down to, as Emily was saying earlier, with the protocol, the different methodologies, that we couldn't build off of it in too directly one-to-one of a way. But the current methodology and protocol used will be very useful in the future. So we tried to be complementary as much as possible. 2006 inventory done in 2008, like you said. But just because of how different, the nature of each beast was, yeah, like I said, couldn't be exactly one-to-one. Yeah. Emily, did you have any other comments there?
Emily?
Sorry, Jackie, were you going to say something?
No, I was just asking you to comment on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dylan really captured it, but to the best of our ability, we did try to align. But again, if there were instances where there was now a better data source available, we did opt to using something that would set us up for future inventory tracking. And ultimately, there were some key differences in the methodology that we needed to adjust and accommodate for how things would be tracked in the future. So I would say, Dylan captured it perfectly, that we did do our best effort to align with it. And we do have some comparisons that we can make, but it is certainly not an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah. And what I would add to that is that we plan on, when we do the climate action plan, obviously with this plan, we're going to have to footnote and note things like this for this plan. And the next plan, we probably won't have to do that as much because we plan to do another one in 5 years to see where we are against this 2025 report. Your question, Alderman Savage, sparked a point I wanted to also make. As you know, because you were involved with it, we did have a climate action plan from several years ago, over 10 years ago now. And what we are doing among staff is making a comparison against the recommendations and actions from the prior climate action plan against what we've accomplished to date. So we'll note probably in an appendix to the climate action plan what was proposed in the prior plan and what has been done by the city since then, and if it hasn't, the reason why, if there is a reason. So we can have that information as well.
That would be interesting. Yeah, I had to chuckle, Jackie, this is the first time in a while that I've opened up that document that I did make, but I had to chuckle because it had in there under the transportation sector inter-harbor ferry system, as well as studying long-term mass transit options, which it only took maybe 15 years, but we're finally looking at those things. But so because thanks for the responses, and I guess to your point, Jack, as far as a footnote, I think that'll just have to be, presumably there'll be some kind of margin of error assumed, at least going back to the 2006. But in any case, one perhaps final question has to do with what do you all see as the greatest value for doing this greenhouse gas inventory? And how do you see it being useful to the public and city government?
I think that what this will do is, first of all, it'll show us where we are and where we've come. Secondly, it will serve as a document that can help us strategize what actions to take to reach our climate goals. And in turn, we can use it to, and part of that, the public, residents, stakeholders, et cetera, have input into that climate action plan, their ideas, their suggestions, their concerns. So it helps guide that plan and thus the types of actions that we take based on that plan. So we have community input and engagement in that. The community is part of our planning process. And lastly, it will drive our funding decisions, because things that we need to do, the actions we need to take to reach these climate goals, it will be clearly set out. And then we'll try to put a dollar value on that as a separate project, so that we can take it to council and say, in order to reach these goals, this is what we need to do over what period of years, and this is how much it will cost. So we'll be able to better validate our funding requests and educate city council and the mayor on what we need to reach those goals.
Yeah, and I do think that will be incredibly useful. It's very timely in the sense that we've just started a brand new council, brand new administration. So
Right.
it is going to be, and so it's very good that it's coming out at the beginning of the administration.
Okay, we have just a little bit more time for any other comments or questions, if anyone has any.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. I think unless I see one at the last second, I think we're good to conclude. Just want to thank everyone again for taking the time to hear about this effort. I want to thank Emily for all the work that she's been doing with Karamita, making sure that this whole plan is up to standard. And again, thanks to Rob for doing the initial analysis to really give us a baseline. We'll make sure to continue to reach out to the best of our ability in the future for the next steps, and to ensure that the community voice is being heard and incorporated into this planning process. Happy holidays, everyone.